Hold this in your hand for a second. It's a real banknote. Not a prop, not a joke, legal tender, printed and signed by a national central bank. And the number on it is $100 trillion. 100 trillion. A 1, followed by 14 zeros. It is the largest number ever printed on a piece of money in the history of the world. And on the day this note came off the press, it was not enough to buy a loaf of bread. Not enough for a bus ticket home. $100 trillion for nothing. Here's the strange part. Zimbabwe, the country that printed this, never ran out of paper. It never ran out of ink, or zeros, or the will to print more. It had all the money it could possibly want. And that is exactly how the money died. This is the story of how a number that big becomes worth nothing, and what it quietly tells you about the far smaller numbers in your own wallet right now. Follow the money. To understand this note, you have to understand a thing we almost never say out loud: money is not wealth. Money is a promise. A banknote is a small paper contract that says the person who issued it, a government, a central bank, is good for it, and that tomorrow it will still buy roughly what it buys today. The paper itself is worthless. What gives it value is the trust standing behind it. Zimbabwe's story is the story of that trust being spent and then destroyed. Rewind to around the year 2000. Zimbabwe was not a rich country, but it worked. It had a functioning currency. For a time, the Zimbabwe dollar traded stronger than the US dollar. It was one of the biggest food producers in the region, exporting maize, tobacco, wheat. And then, over a few short years, the engine that produced real things, real food, real goods, began to break down. A chaotic land reform program pushed experienced commercial farmers off the land, and agricultural output collapsed. Factories starved of input slowed. The country was producing less and less of the actual stuff that money is supposed to buy. But the government's bills didn't shrink. There were salaries to pay, an expensive foreign war to fund, subsidies to keep. Tax revenue was falling because the economy was shrinking. So the government reached for the one lever a government with its own currency always has. It printed the difference. And this is the quiet mechanism at the heart of every hyperinflation. When you print money faster than your country makes things, you don't create wealth, you just spread the same shrinking pile of real goods across a growing mountain of paper. More notes chasing fewer loaves of bread. Each note, therefore, buys a little less. Prices rise. Not because bread got more valuable, because the money got less trusted. At first it's manageable. 10%. Then 50%. Then the numbers stop behaving like numbers you recognize. Because inflation, once it truly takes hold, feeds itself. Here's the trap. If you know, for a fact, that your money will be worth less next week, what do? You spend it now. Immediately. You buy anything, goods, foreign currency, anything real, the moment cash touches your hand, because holding it is a guaranteed loss. But everyone doing that at once means everyone is dumping money and chasing goods, which drives prices up even faster, which makes everyone even more desperate to spend even faster. The expectation of collapse creates the collapse. Trust, once it starts to go, doesn't leak. It runs. By 2007 and 2008, Zimbabwe was living inside that spiral. And the numbers become almost impossible to hold in your head. At the peak, in mid-November 2008, economists estimate the inflation rate hit roughly 79 billion% in a single month. Prices were doubling, on average, about every 24 hours. You could buy a coffee in the morning and by evening the same coffee cost twice as much. Workers demanded to be paid daily, sometimes twice daily, and would run, literally run, from the office to the shops, because a lunch break delay could cost them a third of their wages. Cash stopped being counted and started being weighed. People carried money in plastic bags, in backpacks, in wheelbarrows. Photographs from that time show a loaf of bread priced at hundreds of millions of Zimbabwe dollars, a single loaf costing more paper than a person could comfortably carry. And the Reserve Bank did the only thing it knew how to do. It printed bigger numbers. First thousands. Then millions. Then billions. When the zeros became too many to fit on a note, or to write in a ledger, the government simply crossed them out. In 2006 it lopped 3 zeros off the currency overnight. In 2008, 10 more. In early 2009, another 12. That is not a typo. Over 3 redenominations, Zimbabwe erased 25 zeros from its own money, trying, again and again, to make the numbers small enough to be usable. And every time, inflation raced back and put the zeros right back on. Which is how, in January 2009, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe printed the note in your hand. $100 trillion. It was released alongside its slightly humbler siblings, the 10, 20, and 50 trillion. On the day it appeared, on the street, that 100 trillion note was worth around $30. Within weeks, it was worth essentially nothing. It is the single most honest object in modern finance, a government's own promise, printed at maximum volume, admitting out loud that it means nothing at all. You cannot run an economy like this, and Zimbabwe couldn't either. By April 2009, the government did something almost unheard of. It gave up on its own money. It suspended the Zimbabwe dollar entirely and let people simply use other countries' currencies, the US dollar, the South African rand, for everyday life. A nation abandoned the money printed with its own name on it, because no one, including the government, could pretend to trust it anymore. But the old currency didn't fully disappear until years later, and how it was finally buried is the detail that tells you everything. In 2015, to clear the last worthless balances still sitting in people's bank accounts, the government made an official offer. It would exchange the old Zimbabwe dollars for real US dollars, at a set rate. The rate was 35 quadrillion Zimbabwe dollars, that's 35, followed by 15 zeros, for one single US dollar. Entire life savings, whole account balances, were redeemed for a few American dollars and change. That was the government's own final verdict on the money it had made. And now the twist that, to me, is the whole point of this story. That $100 trillion note, the one that couldn't buy a bus ticket, the one an entire nation walked away from, is today a collector's item. People buy and sell them online for real money, often far more than the note was ever, at any point, actually worth as currency. Economists keep one on the desk as a warning. Tourists buy them as souvenirs. A famous American politician reportedly carried one in his pocket as a reminder of what happens when a government loses control. Think about what that means. As money, as a claim on bread, on fuel, on a day's work, this note failed completely. It reached the value of literally nothing. But as an object, a relic, a story about how money dies, it is worth more today than it ever was when it was legal tender. The value didn't come from the paper. It never does. It came from the story people agreed to tell about it. So what actually happened here? It is tempting to say Zimbabwe printed too much money. That's true, but it's the shallow version. The deeper truth is that Zimbabwe spent something it could never print: trust. A currency is a promise a country makes to its people and to the world, that this paper is a reliable claim on real things, today and tomorrow. Zimbabwe kept making the paper. It kept adding zeros. What it destroyed was the belief behind the paper, and once that belief was gone, no number, however enormous, could bring the value back. 100 trillion of nothing is still nothing. And this is not a story about a faraway place with bad luck. It is a story about what money actually is, everywhere, including in your pocket right now. The notes in your wallet are not valuable because of the cotton and ink. They are valuable because a vast number of people quietly agree, every single day, to keep trusting them. That trust is usually invisible, the way you don't notice the ground until it moves. Zimbabwe is what it looks like when the ground moves. The paper stays exactly the same. Only the story changes. The most important number on any banknote isn't the one printed on the front. It's the amount of trust standing silently behind it, and that number, unlike 100 trillion, can never be printed. It can only be earned or spent. A government that prints money it can't back, and calls the number wealth. If you want to see that exact instinct wearing a suit and a Nobel economist's confidence, a modern institution promising value it did not have, until the whole thing came apart, that story is one click away. Follow the money,